Are the walls closing in on Joe Biden? It certainly seems like that. Some House Democrats are now publicly calling on him to step down. Senate Democrats say he needs to do more to reassure voters at a minimum. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy was supposed to lead a meeting Monday with other Democrats in the upper chamber to discuss Biden's fate. But per reports, the rendezvous has been pushed to tomorrow's weekly Senate luncheon, rather. Here he is with CNN's Dana Bash on Sunday's State of the Union.
This week, I think the president needs to engage in the kind of interaction with voters that will prove to those that are skeptical out there that he can do the job. And if he can't do that, then he's got a decision to make about what the path forward is.
Joining us to discuss the reasons behind the delay is Michael Starr Hopkins, a Democratic strategist. Michael, welcome back to Rising.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get right into it. What are you hearing on the Hill about this disastrous news cycle for Biden? The pressure seems to be mounting. Fill us in.
Yeah, so when I talk to kind of staffers on the Hill, what you're hearing is there's a lot of frustration because the president's signaling to them that in no situation does he see himself getting out. And then when I talk to people on the campaign, you're kind of hearing a muddied effect because he says he's not getting out, but a lot of them can see the writing on the wall. As House members and Senate members come back, they're going to be calling for him to step out of this race, but he's refusing to do so.
He's showing no signs of wanting to get out of this race. Jessica, how's your thinking evolving on this? I still maintain he's not going anywhere.
Well, when you have prominent members of the party that don't want the candidate to be the one running for president, what kind of a party do you have? This is a perfect scenario where there's some kind of coup at the Democratic National Convention this year. Michael, what would you make of something like that happening?
I think it's getting increasingly likely. If President Biden really decides that no matter what, he's not going to step aside, then you're going to have an issue with delegates, because what we're really starting to hear is an increasing effort to move some of those delegates off of the Biden path and to open it up. Now, Democrats' best path forward, I would say, would be having Kamala Harris step forward and then putting somebody like Josh Shapiro as the VP on the ticket. But if we open things up at the convention, then we're really looking to kind of mayhem.
Doesn't Biden have to release his delegates? He won those delegates. I think, what are the circumstances under which they don't actually have to vote for him? I know there are circumstances. It starts to get a little bit technical, but they are, as of now, unless he gives them other instructions, they are extraordinarily likely to choose him as the nominee.
Yeah, the Democrats have gotten rid of what used to be called superdelegates, so they're bound on that first ballot. So likely any kind of movement to remove themselves from having to select him would be led by court challenges. But at the end of the day, what Biden doesn't want is to go into a convention where people are protesting, where his numbers have already cratered, and now it looks increasingly likely that he'll help elect President Trump. And so what we're leading into now is this really kind of decision moment, because Democrats have a little less than 2 weeks to come up with some sort of plan.
Right. And we just saw in the French elections over the weekend that they put an election together very fast. It was a similar kind of framework where they were like, we really have to crush, the far right. And they did it by promising on some policies, not just saying you have to vote for us or else democracy is at stake and the right's going to take over. There was an actual platform. And I think that's what people really want to see. They want to see a Joe Biden that can promise on policies. And that's not the Joe Biden we're getting. And so I think that's the biggest weakness here. And it does take money to win an election, right? And a lot of the major donors are saying that they're going to pull funds. Do you think that, between the Democrats, the prominent Democrats in the House, Senate, governors across the country versus the donors have more sway when it comes to pressuring Biden to step aside?
At the end of the day, the donors are the ones that are going to be the death knell to the campaign, because what you're already starting to hear are people like the Disney heiress saying that they'll only fund down ticket races. Members of Congress obviously are going to be concerned with their election races over Joe Biden's. But once he becomes a drag on the ticket, then that's where you start to see a lot of separation. What I'm really hearing from inside the campaign is he's looking for an off-ramp. You know, there's frustration around him actually saying that he's going to stay in no matter what, but the idea that he would tank Democrats' chances and really put democracy at a threat, I think that's really the legacy that he doesn't want to leave. And so there becomes this question of at what point is he torching his entire legacy, torching Democrats' chances moving forward versus allowing himself to gracefully step aside.
But from his perspective, we know that what he's thinking is they counted me out before. In 2016, I was shoved aside unceremoniously to make way for Hillary Clinton, which ended up being a terrible choice because she lost an election that maybe Biden would have won. Biden then did win against Trump 4 years later, so that kind of demonstrates that experiment a little bit. And even in 2020, he was not automatically at first the choice of anyone. There was top elite media, certainly in Democratic circles, were absolutely against him. They wanted Warren, they wanted Mayor Pete, they wanted Klobuchar. The New York Times endorsed like every candidate but him. They endorsed 2 candidates. There was no movement toward him until it was clear Bernie Sanders was doing really well, and then there was a crystallizing effect around him at that point. But that was belatedly. His view is that he's always been counted out by the people who run the party, and they've gotten it wrong time after time, and he's gonna prove them wrong one last time. That seems to be his mindset, no?
It is. It's almost Trumpian in the way that he's holding the party hostage. But if you really think about it, no one actually chose Joe Biden. If you look back at history and how things worked out, it's like you said, it was the threat that Bernie Sanders was going to be the nominee that forced Democrats to kind of default into Joe Biden. And then it is now the argument that it is because of the threat that Trump poses that Joe Biden has to be the nominee. No one's proactively saying they want Joe Biden to be that person. It's almost a defensive posture. And to go into an election that's this important with a defensive posture, I think, is dangerous.
And an interesting Reuters Ipsos poll came out last week showing that of prominent Democrats, Michelle Obama was the only one in this poll that would beat Trump in a November matchup. And while Joe Biden seemingly needs people close to him to say, yes, it's time to step aside and retire before things get too bad, he almost needs this promising moment of like, you could be the one to usher in Michelle Obama as president. It needs to be not just, we can't have you, Joe. It needs to be, Joe, you could do this really cool other thing. What do you make of the potential of a Michelle Obama candidacy and that path to replacing Joe Biden?
Well, the only thing I can say with 100% confidence is that Michelle Obama is not going to get involved in politics
Correct.
ever again.
Yeah.
But he does have a really interesting opportunity. You know, he's able to say that he's the only person to beat Donald Trump and stop him from really undermining our democracy even further. And by allowing someone like, say, a Kamala Harris, who initially wasn't able to secure the nomination, but has had 3 years to really prepare herself and can actually, I think, turn out African Americans at a higher rate, turn out women at a higher rate than Joe Biden, and make an argument about age and generational change. He has the opportunity to usher that in and really talk about how he led to the defeat of Trump twice. But that's a decision only he can make. Should he decide not to do that and continue to dig his feet in, I think what you're going to see is a Democratic Party that really takes out the knives and starts to leak information, starts to go after the Biden family, and really turn on him in a way that can really get nasty.
I accept. I think it's plausible that Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, based on the polling we've seen, would fare a little bit better than Joe Biden. Even she has a rough road ahead of her if she was running against Donald Trump, if she was the nominee. I think she'd do better. I think it's not so clear that Joe Biden's going to say, yeah, I'm going to step aside. I mean, he still has whatever diminishing by the minute chance of being reelected president, and I just don't see people in that position giving up power, especially when he seems to be listening primarily to his family, to Jill Biden, and to Hunter Biden, who might have some other reason for wanting him to stay in the race. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.